Michael, so excited to have you for this conversation today. I know myself, we have an amazing audience of student founders, investors, operators in the room. Let's just get straight into it. Let's talk a little bit more about your background. What's the path that the audience should know about you? What path you took to get to the point where you are at today?
Sure, yeah. I have no business being in this business of venture capital. I have no background in finance. I thought I was going to be a philosophy professor. I was working towards a doctorate in that subject at Oxford. And I really just wanted to write. I dropped out after losing my 20s to a library. And then, I was a writer for MIT's Technology Review. And it was through there that I met Peter Thiel. We just got along, and he asked me to help him teach a class at Stanford Law School on philosophy and technology. So this is 2010, such an interesting opportunity. I took him up on the offer, and then I show up to work the first day. This was a hedge fund, so it's like just as you would imagine in a movie, stock tickers, CNBC on, trading floor, and I sit down, and I'm already thinking, what the hell am I doing here? And then a colleague comes up to my desk and says, hey, we got to go to Peter's house. Last night on the plane ride from New York to San Francisco, we came up with this idea. It's the anti-Rhodes Scholarship. We're going to give money to people to leave school and work on things. And I was like, because I was at Oxford, I knew Rhodes Scholars, they are so insufferable. They're just, prestige hounds. And so I was like, right away, I said, all right, great, let's do this. So, we go to Peter's house, we get in the car, and before I know it, we're talking about this thing. We're like, what do we call it? How much money is it? Then we're backstage. This was TechCrunch Disrupt. That was a big conference at the time. It still happens, I think. But Peter was scheduled to be interviewed. And so this is so long ago, and it was my first day of work. I can tell you the date. It was September 27th, 2010. And Peter, that Friday, the movie The Social Network was set to premiere. And Aaron Sorkin's script had been leaked. It was clear that Zuckerberg was going to be portrayed negatively, and in one very small scene that Peter would also be portrayed negatively. And so the idea was, well, let's launch this thing on Monday so that no one asks us about this silly movie. And instead they'll want to talk about this new program. So then we're backstage at TechCrunch Disrupt. Peter gets on stage. He announces the Thiel Fellowship like it's something that already exists and is running. He says, we're taking applications. He's talking in the present tense. So that was my first day of work. Got sucked into the Thiel Fellowship, became I helped launch it and then run the program for 5 years. This was a grant program to give $100,000 to 20 people a year. Sorry, just 20. And there were two conditions on that grant. You had to be 19 and under to apply, and you had to drop out of school. You had to leave or never set foot on campus. People hated us right away. Jacob Weisberg at Newsweek wrote a column about how evil we were for doing this, that we were robbing these young people of the wonderful, enriching experience you guys have here on campus. A couple years later, my favorite was Larry Summers, former president of Harvard, Treasury Secretary. He said, and this is my favorite quote, that the Thiel Fellowship was the most misdirected philanthropy of the decade. So people hated us. But co-ran that program for 5 years and just saw amazing things come out of it. We helped Dylan Field launch Figma in 2012. Maybe you guys saw that company went public this last summer. Probably biggest of all, we helped Vitalik Buterin launch Ethereum, the cryptocurrency, in 2014. And all these people were 19 and under when they started. Just really astonishing. If you compare the Thiel Fellowship to Y Combinator, the Thiel Fellowship has a higher rate of billion-dollar companies. In fact, right now, there's no bigger predictor of who will become a billionaire than becoming a Thiel Fellow. It's something like 15% of all Thiel Fellows are billionaires at this point. So it's a higher hit rate than Y Combinator. And at the time, they raised the age to 22, but at the time we were in it, it was 19 and under. Just think of how insane that is. So by 2015, my colleague and I, Danielle Strackman, we decided that rather than giving out grants, we could be making investments. So we started our fund. We're also a number 161. We're 1517, and that's our geeky reference to the year Martin Luther nailed his theses to the church door. What he was protesting was the sale of indulgences. So the church was selling a piece of paper because you could buy your way out of hell. You could spend less time in purgatory. And so we said the diploma is the modern indulgence. In our society, it seems to be everyone's telling you have to go to college to succeed. It's Yale or fail. And so we wanted to stand to thwart that and say no. In fact, that piece of paper may not be as meaningful as you think. Some ideas can't wait. So yeah, that's long story overview, but that's sort of my background.
Yeah. So I want to get to your colleague, Peter Thiel, who is known for asking the question, what truth do few agree with you on? What's your take in an early stage investment setting? What truth do you believe that most VCs probably wouldn't?
I believe child labor is good.
You heard it here first.
I've just met so many people who, older institutions, whether they're universities, but also investors and businesses, they just don't take younger people seriously. Even to this day, I had a pitch a couple weeks ago with a big sovereign wealth fund, and this woman would not believe our model. And she's just like, well, our research, I said something like, I would rather have an A-level technology. Oh, she asked like, hey, you work with younger people. They're terrible managers. They have no experience. And I said, well, I'd rather work with someone with an A-level technology and B-level management than the opposite, A+ management and a bad technology. She's like, oh, but our research shows the opposite. And I'm just like, well, look at our track record. She didn't do that. And then I was like, well, look. And I guess she went to Harvard, had an MBA. And I said, look, a Harvard MBA driving a Pinto is going to lose to a teenager driving without a license in a Ferrari every single time.
Yeah. I want to get into the Thiel Fellowship a little more. So about the current acceptance rate, which is less than 0.1%, about 50 times more competitive than Harvard. With what you're doing now at 1517, how do you find convictions in founders that early?
It starts, what we do, so when we ran the fellowship, we had an application, and in the first year, it was just way too imitative of college applications. We asked what school you went to, what your grades were, what prizes you had won, and what we quickly saw is that was not very predictive when it came to how people just performed out there in the wild. In fact, some of those things became negative signals. There was something called the Intel Science Award, and it just seemed like anyone who had won that award was pretty flimsy. It was clear that was a committee-run prize run by people who just wanted to hear things that sounded good. And so what we saw was the types of people who are good at climbing, pyramid climbing within prestigious institutions, pleasing admissions committees, writing the right essays, pleasing their superiors. Those types of people are not good at starting new things and being creative. And we learned that quickly in the first year. We ended up dropping a lot of those questions. And then the things that do matter, some of them are obvious, like grit and perseverance. But you can't really ask about that in an application or even in an interview. You really have to see it in action over time. The ability to execute and execute and execute in an unforgiving environment year after year is just something you have to see demonstrated. So what we realized is we had to get to know people earlier. We had to interact with them in lighter touch ways. We pioneered like a 1K grant that we give people just to see them build something out there. And if we got to know someone over time, then those traits would become clearer and clearer. We started to learn pretty fast that character mattered most. Like courage is in shorter supply than genius. The willingness to be out there doing something new is really hard. And so what we decided is can we track people over time? And that really helped us. It starts with events like this. It could be coffee meetings. It could be anything. But just so long as you get to know someone over time, you get a better handle on who they are, why they're doing what they're doing, and then you can be more confident in our judgment when we decide to back someone.
Yeah. You mentioned Dylan Field before. I want to talk a little bit more about him and that process. So he was one of the earliest founders of the Teal Fellowship. Figma, CEO of Figma, $19.3 billion IPO in the past couple months. Except he didn't come into the Teal Fellowship talking about design software. He was talking about drones. Can you just tell the story? What happened there? What was the pivot? And how did Dylan know that it was the right time to pivot? How do founders know when their first idea might not be the winner?
Yeah, Dylan is exceptional. He's one of these people, though, who's like a good term is like sometimes you want like a teddy bear who's also a killer, or like someone, like fiercely competitive, but with a golden heart. That fits Dylan's description. He, in fact, is one of the people who got us to change our application, where he decided he didn't want to send his test scores to us. He wrote to us. He's like, yeah, you don't need this. And we were like, yeah, you're right, we don't. So yeah, he applied to the program wanting to work on drones. He came in, he has a co-founder, Evan, and what was so generous about Dylan was the $100K grant. His Evan was older than 19, so he couldn't apply to the fellowship. But Dylan wanted to work with him so much that Dylan split the $100K with Evan. They lived together and got started working on things. The drone idea, I guess they must have seen the limits of the technology and their ability to compete with the existing players, which, DJI was still big then. And so I think, that he changed from that pretty quickly. What I do remember, and maybe this speaks to the value of having like a cohort in a community, especially of really ambitious people. Dylan had some success with like a meme generator. So it was like something weird like that, like a GIF generator. And it was the other Teal fellows who called him out on that. Like he was tempted to keep working on it. And some people were like, no. Like this, you got to build something real. This is not ambitious enough. And he knew it. He came into a meeting and he's like, yeah, this has some traction, but boy, this feels really hollow. So I think that whatever the source of that judgment is, that feeling of is your heart in this, I think, that was clear that Dylan felt that, and eventually he had been thinking about how to design things in the web browser and allow people to cooperate in real time. And so I think that was the calling that came back to him. So it's like it was a good moment and lesson, I think, in don't be attracted to superficial success or some trend. It's hard to believe that like GIFs were a trend at one point. I mean, they are kind of fun, but yeah. So he did go back to design. So I think one of the key lessons there is like you want to be surrounded by ambitious people who will call you out on something. And then the second thing is like, you got to listen to your heart, not your head, and sometimes make those pivots.
Yeah, appreciate it. And something that you talk about a lot is the concept of alchemy within startups, making extraordinary progress with limited resources. What's the best example that you've seen of that?
Well, a recent one, I mentioned these 1K grants we give out. We just, it's not, we don't expect anything really to come from that in terms of like backing a company, but it does happen from time to time. And so I went to an event. It was like student news. Yeah, it was like an event for the people who run student newspapers. And at that event, I met a guy, and he was like, yeah, I know this 17-year-old in Texas. He's really good with guns. He wants to build a new type of gun. He's a cowboy out there on the range. So he gave me his email, and I reached out to this guy, Ethan, and I said, yeah, hey, this other guy told me about you. He said you had some ideas to work on a new type of gun or something. And Ethan replied, he said, yeah, let's talk about it. All right, so he's senior in high school, and 17-year-olds aren't, I guess, always great with keeping a schedule. So when the time came for me to call him, and I called him, he forgot that was during his physics class. So he had to run out of the classroom and take the call in the hallway. And then he's like, yeah. I think gunpowder's outdated. I'm starting to use hydrogen as a propellant in a rifle. just increases range. You can do all these different things. And I was like, all right, well, I'll kick you $1,000, work on this over the summer. He was already accepted to MIT, and he worked on that rifle over the summer. He gets to MIT, and he meets some people, and they're kind of into it because it's like, I guess young boys like blowing things up. So they start developing that rifle. And on MIT's campus, they have a place called the Lincoln Lab, which has long ties to the Department of Defense. And it was through there that they made some contacts, and there were actual, requests for proposals on certain weapon systems. And he and his buddies decided to get serious about this. So that $1,000 then turned quickly into that prototype, which then turned into the team. We made a $100K investment in the company. By the spring, they had decided to try to pursue 3 different weapon systems. At the time, you might recall there was a balloon from China that flew over the U.S. It was at such a high altitude that we couldn't use guns to shoot it down. It required a jet to fire a $500,000 missile. That balloon cost something like $20,000 to build. So there's a real strong cost differential now that's driving a lot of these battles. Like if you look at Ukraine, if you look at the Houthis, one of the biggest issues right now in defense is that you can have $1,000 drones wreaking havoc, and in order to try to defend against them, which in some cases you can't, or in others it's just so costly. So it's like we're shooting $500,000 missiles to take down $1,000 drones. We're just not rich enough as a country to do that. And in Ukraine, it's almost like the battlefield has turned back to World War I, meaning tanks are useless. You have $1,000 drones with C4 attached to them blowing up tanks, that cost millions. Now think about that for the ocean with ships, and like it terrifies me to think about the future of war. So Ethan and his buddies decided to attack this problem. Like with the balloon, they can use the hydrogen to create a howitzer that shoots anything down from that altitude. They started to use hydrogen as a fuel for drones and other weapon systems. So they were on their way. They raised a seed round from Sequoia. Now, a few years later, they're up to like 100 employees. Their weapons have been used on the battlefield in Ukraine. And so for me, it's like that's just mind-blowing that this started with a conversation with a guy jumping out of a classroom in high school in $1,000, and to just see them use those resources. Sometimes I say it's like Stone Soup, that old story about some soldiers returning from war in Europe. And it's like 19th century story, it's a fable or something, but these guys come into town and they're starving, and one of them comes up with the idea, we'll pitch the village on Stone Soup. Well, what's that? We're just going to say we have a pot and stones, and then we'll ask each house for ingredients, and then it works. It's like knock on the first door, hey, we're making stone soup, do you have carrots? And they're like, yeah, next house, and so on. And then eventually you throw the stones out and you have the ingredients for soup. Sometimes startups like that. And if the cycle of making, there are just some people who can make extraordinary progress on few resources. It's impressive to see.
Yeah. And you've worked with companies that have had multi-billion-dollar outcomes. You've seen thousands of startups. With that information, there had to have been at least one that sticks out in your mind that you've missed over the time. Can you talk about that one that popped up into your head just now, and how has that changed your evaluation
Companies
criteria?
we've missed?
Yeah.
First year of the fellowship, 2011, Stanley Tang was an applicant. He's one of the co-founders of DoorDash. The DoorDash was not what was pitched. But we passed on Stanley. He's now a billionaire. Let's see. We've had sometimes it's like just like the business of venture capital. Not with the fellowship. We never. I mean that was probably the biggest one where like someone actually came in, pitched us, and we missed out. That's the one. But the fellowship goes to a person. What we realized when we started the fund is, you're looking at companies, and it's just different economics. I mean, you got to think about how to return the fund. What happens sometimes is Y Combinator, let's say, we met some people, they come out of Y Combinator, and then they're raising at such a high valuation for us and our business model that we've passed. So it wasn't something about the person. We were impressed with them. And in that case, there have been a couple companies that we've missed where they came in and it's just like, hey guys, this is too expensive. And then they went on and became $1 billion company. Alex Rodriguez started a company. Originally it was driverless golf carts. It eventually became a system for driverless trucks that was doing quite well. And then it's the ones you don't even see. So even within the Teal Fellowship, so we had left the Teal Fellowship, we started our fund. And in that first year or second year after that, Alexander Wang, Scale AI, came through the program. I guess our reputation, they didn't reach out to us, and so we never got to see the investment. And obviously, they did really well. Another one in that respect would be a company called Mercor that's taking off now. So there are a couple out there where even though they became Teal Fellows, we just didn't even see them on the fund side. So yeah, it's really not the ones it's like, what is it, it's not the ones you pass on that you regret. I mean, that's tough, but for me, I'm always more concerned about what are the ones where I never even got a shot because we never even met. Yeah. Those seem to be the bigger misses.
Absolutely. All right, so we're almost coming on time here. So I'm going to ask 2 quick questions. I want to run through. They're very specific for the people in this room. Then we'll take one more question from the audience. Florida is not Silicon Valley. You are personally based in Telluride, Colorado. Does geography matter for founders at this point in 2025?
I think it does. That's what I've come to see living in Telluride. So during COVID, I moved to the mountains. It's just really hard. There's not a lot of action in town. I mean, it's a great place to retreat to, but I'm on the road a lot. I wrote an obituary for San Francisco in 2018. I mean, I thought that city was toast. By 2020, I was like, damn, I am right. The zombie apocalypse in the streets. The rent was out of control. They just have prohibited building anything new. So you have more people, more money, and the same amount of housing. That's simple econ. Not a good situation. So I just thought the politics were so deranged that the city was toast. Yep. And yet the network effects have proven to be so powerful that it is still the top magnet when it comes to startups, especially AI engineering. So I do think there's something really powerful about these creative clusters. I think San Francisco, Bay Area is still number one. Then you could talk about LA, Austin, maybe Boston, then New York. I don't know the order, but those are going to be the ones. Miami's coming up. What I would say is that you can start things anywhere. And by starting things, I characterize that as maybe the first year to 2 years of a company. Maybe there are 2, 3 co-founders, and then maybe up to the first 10 employees. But eventually, I think, and it always depends on the business, but eventually I think if you really want to scale, if you really want to be challenged by the ambition around you to think bigger, I do think it's important to be in one of these bigger ecosystems. Context is everything. So it could, if you're working on a cure for cancer and you need to be in a lab here, and you're working on that, okay, I get that. Cancer has a market. Everyone's going to want your cure. But for most things nowadays, I just see it's just so interesting. In the fellowship, when I think about what was learned, it's just wild to me in retrospect how important it was for those fellows to move to San Francisco and be totally surrounded and inundated by the Steve Jobs, I'm going to change the world attitude. There were people who hated that. There was this one guy in particular who just thought it was so cringe that anyone would think that, would say, oh, my startup is going to put a dent in the universe. Yeah. He was more of a researcher. He was working on neural nets in 2012. He was Canadian from Toronto. I had to write his O1 visa application, so I was digging into what he's working on. You have to explain that. And he was telling me at the time about how these algorithms could predict the next word in a sentence. And I was like, oh, that's cute. So this guy hangs out in San Francisco long enough. He worked at Google Brain, and then just befriend, and there were other people out of our program. One guy was a mentor, and these guys, they all formed Anthropic. They were Chris Olah is one of the founders of Anthropic. So it's interesting to me that a guy who hated the startup culture he was just so surrounded. Like, even if you hate it, you're soaking it in, and then you get sucked up into it. And then the size of the ambition. It's just, if you look at the market cap of companies that come out of each city, the biggest market cap company is going to set a bound on what you think is possible in that city. And so in San Francisco now, you have trillion-dollar companies. Like, nothing gets bigger than that. So yeah, I do think it's important. But on the other hand, it could be good to like take the first year, work with your friends, build from here, and then move.
Yeah. Okay, so we only have a minute left, so we're just going to ask one more question and cut it off there. But we have a lot of students in the room right now, a lot of students that have an idea, that want to take the next step towards being a founder. What should they be doing right after this event?
Definitely, I mean, it's great that there are all these funds. You guys, I was talking to these guys who are coming up. I mean, there are a lot of people who can help you out, get started. You can reach out to us anytime, 1517fund.com. We have a form, contact form. We answer it. We have events. I'm happy to jump on a call with anyone. It's just really easy to interact with us. But get building, ship, real artists ship. Get out there, execute, ship. If there's a saying, if you're not embarrassed of your product when you ship it, then you've waited too long. Don't try to protect your baby. Get it out in the world. But yeah, definitely reach out. We'll do what we can to help.
Amazing. Awesome. Michael, really appreciate the time. I know I learned a lot during this conversation. I know the audience has too.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here. I wrote a book. I have some copies somewhere. There are like 10 of them. Behind the scenes account of everything we do. Happy to give that away.
Awesome. Michael Gibson, everyone.